Yep. Go.
Yeah, I've just been reading a LinkedIn article on this subject. The rise of these secondary sheds is growing. The sales are growing massively as people realize that they're going to be working from home on a long-term basis. And for people who've got the space and they can afford to create this physical separate space, I think it's going to be a great way of juggling these hats that you have to wear. And even if you don't have the luxury of being able to have a separate physical space, anything that you can do in your home to shut a door, and and thinking of stuff like these devices here, just making sure that you put them to one side so that you can dedicate when you are wearing the dad hat or the mum hat, or when you are wearing the spouse hat, that actually you're not wearing a spouse hat and just picking up a couple of emails that have come in from America because it happens to coincide with their working hours now.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point in terms of while we're like wearing these hats as a physical reminder of just how important it is to switch hats. My wife just left the house, not because of me, but we had lunch and then she said, I'm sick of working in the same office every single day at home. I'm going to go to a cafe and spend the afternoon working from there to change up the environment and just get a new bit of stimulus. And I said, go ahead, go for it. Like, for me, my stimulus is going out on the bike and wearing this and looking at the view that I had behind me, which is my bike ride from last Sunday. And that gives me the inspiration and that break to take, when I have my work hat on, when
I can hear it.
Yep, and this is on so firmly and stressed, and rather than when the kids come home and get super angry and forget that it's on, I'm work stress isn't very happy today. I take it off and I put the bike up on and I go for it. Just a half an hour, 40-minute ride, and I come back and people know, or my kids know that, my wife know that this hat means happy Sean and refreshed and someone nice to talk to, as opposed to if I left that work hat on, I'd be grumpy and moody and all the other things that I was before I sort of became aware of changing hats more often. So I think it's good for both encouraging our partners or our colleagues to, as you say, if you can't build your own workplace in your home, go and visit one. Just break that space if you're allowed from distancing wise.
Yeah. And then the other thing, it's the transitions, and what you're describing there is that transition from work Sean to family Sean via cycling Sean, and and for other people, maybe take the dogs out for a walk, and you come to the end of the day, they're probably looking forward to it anyway, and use that time to make that transition from work to the next hat you need to wear. I think and that's the one thing that the lack of the commute has created. It's that inability to transition from one mindset and one mode to the second mindset and the second mode. And whilst I'm absolutely sure that most people, if they can, will continue to work from home for all the benefits that it brings, it needs to be managed much more actively to avoid some of the stresses of not having those transitions.
And speaking of managing, a question for you in terms of, with your expert in remote learning and remote coaching, how should, now we're glued to these computer screens and we have back-to-back meetings, what are some tips that colleagues can have or managers to employer can have to each other when they first, start a meeting rather than going straight into the content? Like, how can people ease into the stress or like engage in terms of how are you, or what's some habits that people can introduce each other to help people feel not that cutthroat from the beginning of back-to-back meetings?
Okay, well, tip number one is don't plan your meetings for full hours. I think that's the easiest and best tip I can give. So always schedule for 55 minutes. It avoids the embarrassment of being 5 minutes late because nature calls at the end of one meeting and you're already committed to the next one. we're humans. We need a little bit of a break, and just like that transition that we just talked about from being, work Sean to family Sean, it is, we need time to just process what we've been, receiving in one meeting before we go into the next one. And I think, often because we haven't given ourselves that time, that 5 or 10 minutes between sessions, we're probably not fully engaged in the next one for the 10 to 15 minutes. So even if you take that opportunity to go through pleasantries, probably 75% of the people that are on the call are still thinking, well, what did I do in the last hour there? And what's that mean for me? And Christ, that means I've got a report to prepare for the next week. So even if somebody who hasn't had all of that stress and is talking about their holiday and all these nice things that they've been doing, you can't do anything about it because no one's listening.
Yeah.
So, so I think, if you want to use your Zoom or your Teams or any of the other technologies to build community, you've got to think, well, what state are people in? Are they are they going to be receptive to, wanting to ask, so where was that photograph taken, Sean? Or will it be just actually, oh, Sean's got a new background. Let's get into the content of the session, because nobody, and so you've got to have people in the right frame of mind there.
Yeah, I think it's always nice to be on the receiving end of having somebody to take an interest of, as you say, even though you're super busy, what's in your background, or just simple as how are you feeling today, or you look stressed, everything okay, or anything I can do to help. To me, it's from our meetings we have at work, those type of things don't really happen that much these days. Is it something which we're too busy with our a hat so planted on that? Are you seeing that people either feel embarrassed to ask because of most of the time it's going to be like COVID in terms of I'm struggling with the lockdown, or why is it that we're not offering this type of empathy and these type of questions than before?
Well, yeah, I guess that I'm very fortunate with a number of the people that I work with on a regular basis. They have that awareness and they have that sensitivity. And earlier this week, when I was had a bit of a traumatic week moment at home, a couple of my colleagues were aware enough of the difference in my demeanour to actually just ask a question and actually be genuinely interested in the response. And I think actually that's the second part of it. Even if you notice, you've got to then follow this through and be genuinely interested in what you're going to hear. Yeah. So, it's almost, you're better off not actually expressing an interest if you don't want to hear the response than you are to show this, I must go through my notes. My notes say that in the first 2 minutes, feign an interest in Sean's background. Ask him the question, but don't actually listen to the answer that he's giving, because actually it's the work itself that matters most. So you're either interested or you're not interested, and I think that people need to make that time. So I think, again, and it's interesting. I think if there's a theme of today's session, it's transitions. Create the transitions between the hats that you're wearing at home. Create the transitions in the meetings you're having for work, because they're the critical things that if you'd been in office, you'd be walking from one meeting room to the other. Because you're still making the mistake of blocking 1 hour for one and 1 hour for the next. So you're still going to be late, but actually think of transitions.
And I'll do that, because I'll now switch to my family hat on. In terms of some, and there'll be a segue to the article we talked about last week, which we wanted to talk about today. Greg Orm's Zoom Out, excellent article, which we'll link on the show notes. But essentially, this one was about curiosity and the need of, rather than everybody zooming in about COVID and the news that it brings and everything like bleak and stressful, to actually zoom out and also be curious. And one of the things that I've taken on board with that is listening to more podcasts that is not work related. So as Greg put in the podcast, in his article, listen to or read things or engage with things which is completely different to what you do for your work or to broaden your horizons. So last week I listened to it twice because it was so good. It was a podcast by Tim Ferriss, and he interviewed Hugh Jackman. And being Australian, he was definitely such a relaxed and entertaining guy. But the podcast I recommend, and I'll put it in the show notes, to listen to this podcast, because there's a lot of things about transitions that and habits that I've taken on board already, which we can deal about today's stress. One of them particularly is about meditation, and where in the first thing in the morning that he does with his wife is they meditate in terms of the most important thing in the day to help him feel grounded rather than the stress hit him, is to have time to reflect and to be at ease with themselves. And yes, you don't have to hold your fingers and closing. Meditation can be as simple as this, going out for a walk or sitting on your chair by yourself and listening to some music. So that's something which I've been doing in terms of having that, rather than the first thing, get up in the morning, check your phone, or have the kids come up with you with I need breakfast and these type of things, is to have some type of meditation to embark on. So what was your reflections, Phil, in terms of some of the article about other things that you've resonated with or you've tried to do? Because I think that was really helpful. What he did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, let's start with Greg's writing some really interesting stuff now. So and I'm very grateful that he shares it so openly. So there are a couple of things in this article about zooming out that struck me. First of all, is the recognition that it is human to zoom in times of stress, because it's a self-defense mechanism, and we're kind of we've been used to doing that as humans for the last 50,000 years. So that primitive part of our brain does zoom in, and it's self-preservation. He says, though, that to zoom out is that behavior change, that choice that we can make that makes a real difference. The first thing he says, that companies that zoomed out back in the 2008 recession and invested in developing their people saw a significant increase on their returns compared to the companies that didn't invest in their people.
Yeah.
He talks really well about how being curious is a great way of connecting seemingly random dots, and you're never quite sure where they're going to link. And so my curiosity has taken me on, and I was going to show you the book, but of course it's on my Kindle here, is on Indian mythology. And I've been working with Indian companies now for more than 12 years, and I've never really fully appreciated just how different the Indian mythology is to the monotheist mythologies that we follow in the Western world. And learning about it has been just a revelation, and it just helps me massively begin to understand some of the things that I see and have seen and have experienced over the last 12 years, because there are connections. I didn't realize there were going to be, but the book suddenly makes it very, very clear.
Yeah, that was actually, speaking of the article, that was one of the big highlights for me that I picked up on too, in terms of the leaders, who invested in the high leaders, how much that contributed to their performance. And I think that's a big takeaway, that a great thing for us at SEB, who I work for. They've put on this huge learning campus, where we have a huge array of learnings that we can take on, everything from technology to personal leadership, everything, almost everything. But and that's something which rather than thinking, oh, I'm always too busy to learn, you're never too busy to learn, and that's where you should almost take your hat off and put a learning hat on and say, learn something different to what you're doing today, because mentally it's giving you a break, it's taking the stress away. But as I say, in the long term, you're going to be better off for you, and so is the company. So I think that's one thing which we should definitely recommend our listeners to learn something or read something or even try something. Don't be like, even if it's, what am I going to use this for? As Greg put in an article, just try. You'd be surprised of the connection it may end up having with like Apple Jobs, learning calligraphy classes when he dropped out of university, which had nothing to do with computers, but down the track it did. So I think, as I say, never be too short-sighted about is this going to benefit my job? Rather than thinking this is fun and then take it like that. This could be new.
And I was watching a TED talk yesterday from a guy who is a self-confessed introvert, talking about how introverts can network. And he says he describes networking. He says, I don't network. He said, I collect dots.
Yeah.
I collect dots, and then from time to time I connect dots, and I find ways of how one dot that I have can make sense to another dot that I have. And that's the curiosity. And he said, I don't network. He said, I just collect dots. And then from time to time, I make connections between those dots. And he said, some people call it common sense, but it isn't. It might be common sense to me, but it doesn't mean it's common sense to other people.
Exactly.
And so again, be curious, collect dots, and see where the connections take place.
Exactly, and that's where I think, as I said, listening to podcasts too is a great way of doing it. There's another podcast out there called The School of Greatness by Lewis Howes, and we'll put that in the show notes. And that's basically Lewis Howes interviewing completely different people from different walks of life, from actors to business people to sports people, but then always at the end, asking them, what does great mean to you? And I think that's where, regardless of whether you're a banker like me or a coach like yourself, we all do things differently, and at the same time, we're always growing and learning. And just because of today we have COVID and we are, facing stress, use it as an opportunity to say, okay, what can I be great at, which I haven't done before, or listen to something which I can learn from other people who are great to help you feel good. I think that's podcasts, reading, finding a new hobby, meditating, all these different things. So trying to take a break from what we are facing with today. And if you're at home locked down, you have your noise cancelling headphones, zoom out and zoom into a podcast or a book, and you'd be amazed how much it feels. And also the amount of wisdom or word of advice that not just you get from this podcast, but for other people who give their own insights. Because I think almost every podcast I go to my wife, I just learned something great today from this podcast. Let's try this, and that in itself changes your mood and changes your hat. So that's something which I've really found it. How about yourself, Phil? Like, what have you found personally, other than the Kindle and other things? Have you found anything else from Greg's article that you've tried that has been curious or new that have given a profound effect?
Well, I mean, it kind of links to that networking piece, and I think the curiosity. Keep asking yourself questions and force yourself to go and meet and make new connections. And I think that what I've done over the last few months more than anything else is I've just lost a lot of the inhibitions and barriers that I might have had in the past to actually go out and connect with new people and discover that overwhelmingly people are very happy to connect. So long as you go in remembering that you want something, you're curious about them, they want to be curious about you. And it's been a delight, an absolute delight. Even just before this call today, reached out to a Turkish leader who I know is going to become a really useful, really welcome connection. Not useful, that's the wrong word, but just somebody I will enjoy spending time with.
And for me, I think looking at zooming back into COVID, it's probably been the best thing for me that this happened, because it forced me to take new things which I've never done. First of all, coming across Greg Orm's work today, that not just today, but his webinar series he did with Jamie Anderson and a few others who have done a few series together. Fabrique, she's a neuroscientist, excellent work. The three of them did a series I recommend that people check out in the show notes. I wouldn't have found them if it wasn't for the COVID, for them doing their webinar series, because they're busy people who do keynotes physically around the world. But also too, which I want to feature in the next podcast, is this Hintsa program, which I've been doing for the last 8 months, which is focusing on high performance and a holistic model, which Hintsa, if you don't know, and I'll put it in the show notes. that most of the Formula One drivers have a HINSA coach in terms of helping them maintain and sustain high performance. And there's a module as a program which I've done for individuals, not from work, but I personally paid for it to benefit my own performance as well as managing the stress and holistic. So since we're running out of time, I'm going to I've got that for our next episode for us to sort of give people an overview of what it is, how's it helped me, and to show some insights of before and after. So next week, everybody, I'll uncover the HINSA wheel of myself and look at the good, the bad, now the best that's come out of it. So that's next week. So I see we're just about out of time, Phil, and it's been an excellent episode in terms of being curious, sharing some knowledge.
And managing transitions.
Exactly. And people, please learn how to switch hats in a good way, and don't leave your work home for too long. Please change hats. Please be family, be healthy, have things that are, even buy a new hat, learn a new hobby, something new. So with that, Phil, have a great weekend.
You too, Sean.
Have a fun hat on for the week, a beer hat, I suppose. So
I'll tell you all about it next week.
Fantastic.
Take care now.
And you too. Have a nice weekend.
All right. Gotta go. Bye-bye.
Bye.